Welcome to the London Commercial Offices podcast with me, your host, Steve Berridge, Managing Director at Fidgens Cost Management. This is a podcast where we share the stories, career paths, lessons and insights from some of the industry's most influential people. Anything contained within our podcast should not be considered professional advice, and if you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe or follow buttons to ensure you don't miss any of the amazing guests we've got coming up. It also really helps us grow the show. Thanks. Today we're joined by James Pellatt, ex-Head of Projects and Director of Workplace Innovation at GPE, now Strategic Advisor and Non-Exec at 2 real estate software companies. A hugely respected project manager across the industry, we're going to touch on James's career path and some of the lessons learned along the way, before moving on to a subject that I know he's very passionate about, and that being the transformative effect of AI in real estate. James, welcome to the show.
Well, Stephen, thank you for having me. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Pleasure. But before we dig into the topic of AI, and for any of our listeners that don't know who you are, I thought it's always useful just to sort of take a step back and a quick look at how you got into real estate in the first place, which, if I recall correctly, started with a lost CV from memory.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, that's a good question. So, many years ago when I was a graduate, I guess I've always been fortunate. Sorry, just to go back a bit earlier, I've always wanted to work in real estate. And my first career move was with a company called Watts and Partners, and they still exist today. They're a great business. And this is back in the days of the post, and you had to send your CV off, and I got all these rejection letters. It was 1993.
I do still remember that, just.
It was 1993, and there was lots of, it was a recession, and it was hard to get a graduate job. But I got one letter back from them saying, "Oh, would you mind resending us your CV because we've lost it, but we know it was of interest." And then the next day I got a letter saying you've been rejected, which I thought was rather unfair because clearly they didn't have it. And so I phoned up Ted Watts in my absolute naivety to say, "What are you doing? How could you reject me when you didn't have it?" He obviously didn't have any clue that I was in this graduate program, but I think
how did you get my number?
Yeah, I think the fact that I was in a phone box, I was putting 10p pieces into a phone box as well. This is how bad it was. I think it just goes to show, and I'd probably useful advice to any listener really, that don't hold back, right? Never have a regret about something. If you feel like you should go for anything that you want to go for in your career, then as much doubt as you have in your mind, or as much as you think you shouldn't do it, it's better to try than to regret not trying, I think. And that's probably why I've ended up where I am today, really looking into the future and different things and not having any regrets. So that's probably a metaphor for another discussion.
So the tactic worked at Watts.
It worked.
So you joined as a graduate, as a project surveyor, as a project manager?
No, I was a building surveyor at that time. Project management wasn't quite as established as it was. There was no career path through the RICS, or you couldn't become a chartered project manager. To get to that point, you needed to, they still had cost consulting or planning and development or general practice, but then it was building surveying. Now, of course, it's different. There is the project management module, and you could do a degree in project management, and perhaps that would have been better off for me to have done that. But I started off as a building surveyor, which was really useful for me, learning on minor works projects, if I'm honest. So when you're having to do all the drawings, do all the specification, do all of the contract administration, actually it's a really, really good learning curve to understand how contracts work and how the process works. And looking back on it now, actually that's really fortunate thinking about it. I didn't quite feel that at the time, but still, it's an interesting thing.
And how long were you at Watts for?
I was there 5 years. We did start in project management. We moved on we had a fascinating project building an animal hospital in Victoria and in Wandsworth for a charity called the Blue Cross, which was really interesting. And then I moved to EC Harris, which is now Arcadis, and progressed to become a partner there in the project management team. But I always wanted to go to be on the client side, and I was lucky enough to join More London Development. So, that scheme used to be the Mayor's office. It isn't anymore, but that point by Tower Bridge, I had very many happy years working there. I got my first sort of taste of working on the client side of things.
How did the client side jump come about? Was that an introduction through EC Harris? Were you working with them?
I was working for More London as a consultant when I was at EC Harris, and just utter persistence. I always wanted to be where decisions got made, really, and really wanting to make that leap of being as close to where the decisions got set. I was trying for years really to do that. And it's a bit like becoming an actor. You couldn't get your equity card until you got the piece. And so lots of people say, well, you can't go client side until you've got any client experience. And I was seconded to a private real estate company called Hillstone, which aren't very big, but I was building a project for them called Northcliffe House, which was an extension. It was at the back end of Freshfields when they're still there. I was like in my late 20s, project managing this development, and I was so out of my depth, so ridiculously out of my depth. I pushed it thinking I should work through, and really what I should look back on is to ask for more help than I got. But I learned a great deal, actually, again, at that point, again, about the process of buildings, how it gets put together, where inefficiencies occur. I mean, it was a disastrous project, really. It was 16 weeks late in the end. I mean, it sounds an odd way to sort of talk about your massive failures, but again, I think it's a key point of learning. I wanted to see the project out to the end and to learn from those inefficiencies or mistakes, because it sort of made you think, okay, I'm not repeating this ever again. You know, why did it go wrong? What's gone wrong? Sort of keep striving for better. I was lucky enough to do a lot of fund monitoring as well at the time. So I did. At the time, Heron Corporation were the sort of largest developer in London. And I was really lucky to work alongside or to observe Heron doing some work and other project managers who worked. So Chris Busher was Second London War. A great influence on my career, really, just sort of seeing how other people did it. And again, it was just a brilliant learning experience to sort of see and learn and observe and understand how people do stuff.
What was the kind of the team setup at More London? Was it a big team, small team?
It was a very small team. There were only 8 of us, a really talented group of people. Tony Wall, who's now the lead at Stanhope, was there. Liam Bond and Alistair, also very active and still in the London development market. So it was only 8 of us, but we were all concentrating on our plots. It was all construction management, which was also really helpful at the time, right? Because there was nowhere to hide in the design or the contract or where anything went. So that was also a very good learning curve for me. And it was the first time that I saw the trade contractors using digital drawing techniques. And I couldn't really understand why were M&E contractors using 3D design for fabrication when the 3 M&E engineers weren't using it. And it seemed to me like a massive inefficiency.
Head of the curve.
Yeah. And it's
that was what, pre-2005?
Yeah, this is 2000. Yeah, this is around 2000. Yeah, it was about 2004, 2005. So again, it was that sort of trying to get to the efficient part of it, right? Trying to manage the team to work out how do I get the best out of people, but also how do I get the best out of the technology that's there? And you begin to realize that the inefficiencies, and I think it's quite a steep learning curve to become when I actually got to go client side. I think a lot of people, when they get to that point, think, okay, that's it, I've arrived, I'm the client now. And everybody's going to do what I tell them to do. And you learn actually that power can go to your head. It's not quite what it is you want to do. And I think a lot of problems in our industry are because, this is perhaps a controversial thing to say, but there's a lot of people in client roles that are not fully aware of the consequences of what it is they say and they do. I think there's that management principle, the Peter principle, which is you get promoted to the point of incompetence. It's strong to say they're incompetent. If you're employed because the client organization doesn't trust the contracting organization and they think that they can manage that risk by like taking poachers, taking gamekeepers, and somebody who understands the construction industry can stop where all the hidden problems occur. Actually, what you're saying is, I don't trust my contractor and I'm going to try and find reasons to blame it. And it became a very aggressive, adversarial, and actually it's I think a collective waste of time. What you really want to understand as a client is, where is my risk? Where are the things that are going wrong? Where are the things that I can manage my risk? And actually, how can I get a motivated team that want to solve my problems to mitigate that risk? Now, you can do it contractually, but I always think that's a bit of a myth, right? Although I can tie something up contractually and the contractor's taking like the program risk, even the best damages that you can apply to that contractor, you're never covering your actual loss, right? Because the loss of income that you're getting from the development or whatever it is you're doing is never enough to recover it. And so it's a bit of a myth, I think, and it's a bit of a mess that. And again, people think, I've covered all this stuff off. But what you end up doing is creating a culture of blame and a very dysfunctional team. And what we did at More London, it was enough to learn that actually collectively, when you're exposed under a construction management job, you've got nowhere to hide, right? So you're trying to find out, where is the design, where is the coordination, and you get to solve problems instead of getting to point fingers. And that was very useful for me. And I moved on from there to an American developer called Tushman Spire, which was a really great learning experience. So I've suddenly gone from everything being in central London to international. So I did a lot of work in Europe, a lot of work in London still, but also some work in New York, and was lucky enough to be at the very early stages of the Bloomberg project, the building that's there now, and putting together that design competition and design team. That was a really great experience because learning the international perspective is really important. Worked with some tremendously talented people there. And it was my first experience of what is now called BIM. But at the time, Tishman and Spire were acting for the New York Yankees building their stadium. For those that don't know it, it's not in, it's a baseball stadium, but it was the first time I'd seen this sort of coordination of the whole in a virtual world before it was built, and thinking, and it's a useful time. I was sat next to the company offsite and they were talking us through this project. And I was sat next to the head of HR and I said, wow, this technology is going to make us all unemployed. And it's sort of the prescient for today when, everyone's talking about AI and how it's going to make us unemployed. But I remember thinking, actually, this should improve a great deal of what we did. And fast forward to 2011, I was lucky enough to join Great Portland Estates as head of projects. But as you remember, that was the time when Paul Morrell, as the construction advisor, issued the government BIM mandate and said that any construction project by 2016, 5 years' time, must use BIM in its design and procurement, which was a perfect initiative. And it was something that all of a sudden I joined GPE. We had 16 projects on the go. And it was this opportunity that I had the leadership position, and I then had the technical opportunity to start to use these tools that would allow us to improve the coordination. And Stephen, being a cost consultant, we used to have, and I know it's slightly out of touch, but the wonderful initials BWIC, Builders Work in Connection, which was as a percentage.
It's still around.
Yeah.
It's the pot of money.
Yeah. And it was just like saying, yeah, this is just for cock-ups and things that we don't know that we haven't coordinated. And it was just, it was a percentage of the contract. So basically I took half of that BWIC budget that was in the cost plan anyway and used it to fund the BIM model. And there was a development called 240 Blackfriars, which is AHMM, Mace, and a couple of other designers at the time. So it was AKT, and it was also Hilson Moran. So that was who we were working with. It was the first time that I worked with a company called BIM Technologies that helped us write our BIM plan, execution plan. And it was the first time working with Mace that I'd gone into general contracting. I'd worked with them at More London before. And it was a bit of a leap of faith for all of us. And I remember all of us being a bit stressed and a bit worried about, is this actually going to work? Is it a gimmick? Will it cause a lot of pain? And again, a very valuable lesson from a colleague. I sort of joined GP and they're sort of looking at me going, what's this new technology and why am I doing this? If it doesn't work, we'll just stop. Let's give it a go and see. If we think it's going to get in the way, fair enough. But if we don't think it's going to get anywhere, then let us stop. I didn't actually have any intention of stopping, but it was an important point.
Just to appease the other stakeholders.
Yeah, or just to take away the fear of failure or of it going wrong, really. What I learned, a really valuable lesson there, was that their concern was that, look, I really want to build this building. I really want to do a great job. But is this going to get in the way of my process? Is it going to hurt me when I do it? For people watching this podcast and listening to it, we should do a link to the building, because what is this sort of funny, faceted, diamond-shaped building? All of the plant was in the roof, but the roof sloped up and there was a triple-story space at the top of the building. And the plant room sort of sat behind that. And if we hadn't coordinated that virtually first, we would have been weeks and weeks, if not months late. There's no question, because it was so hard for us to imagine it and to build it and to put it into a different in a
form. two-dimensional way.
And it was such a valuable experience for us, for everybody involved. And even though it was by then a design and build contract, I hadn't lost the ability to engage with the trades, and the brilliant trades like Clarks and Lonsdales, Schelderbau, all bought into it. So we were going through the supply chain to get to where we needed to get to. We'd started to use BIM as standard, and to this day, GPE still use it. It's a key part of what the process that they go through. It saves, for every pound we spent, we probably saved 2. But I just think it gave great quality product and product that was on time, and that was that's really important. That was one of the first times I started working with BIM Technologies and that team. I've worked with them ever since, and they've always responded and partnered and innovated together collaboratively. That we learned from it all. They've gone from strength to strength. And then fast forward to 2018, I realized that we had these BIM models and they were really useful, but they didn't actually get used in occupation. once we'd finished the job. Rob and Adam at BIM Technologies listened to me, and they developed a digital twin by connecting it to the BMS and the operation of the building. And we came to build a building at Hickman, which is in East London. And it was like our test lab, really, if you like, for GPE. It was a place where we decided to try some innovation. And we built a virtual replica of the building that's connected to all of the plant and the equipment and operation that works in the building. We worked really well with another partner, different company called Smart Spaces, that we then had a workplace app that connected to the building. And that meant that we were able to balance it. Once we'd handed it over, we could balance that piece between occupation and optimization. So you're trying to reduce the energy consumption, which is really important from a sustainability point of view, but customer satisfaction was really high. And this is the time when in my career I'd shifted from being head of projects to director of workplace and innovation. And it's because I could see that the world of technology was shifting, and that by not interfering with the construction process, we could create this working model that was there, that gave us a great amount of insight and data. And then what do we do with it and how do we move on with it? And so I was really proud of the team to do what we did. And there's a thing called Wired Score, which measures the building's connectivity, but also its smartness and how smart a building. And it became the world's first platinum smart building. And that was really proud achievement, because we did that. And that was through the collaborations that we'd made back in 2011, 2015, 2016, not with a view saying we're going to create the world's smartest building, but because we just pushed it to see where we could get to. That was really fascinating to me, and working and partnering with technologists and contractors with an open mind to see what we could get to. And that's been really stood me in good stead throughout my career. And then to the latter part of it, as purely director of innovation, and I developed an innovation strategy at GPE, which was to digitize our business to enhance the customer's experience. So we were there not innovating for the sake of it, but we were trying to use the best available technology to carry out digitizing of our business. So that meant investment in things like our data warehouse, CRM, different software tools, so that we could manage the resulting data and give ourselves better insights. And what that did is it drove down energy consumption by 15%, increased the Net Promoter Score, which is a measure of customer satisfaction, by 20 points, and improved staff efficiency by 5%. So we're starting to get to that point of using our data in an imaginative way. And as you've all seen from Microsoft's investment in OpenAI and what it means for things like Copilot, it means that you've then got to a point of using data in a property portfolio to start to begin to think about how you're going to use AI and how you're going to further optimize the process in the buildings, and to we'll get to. And that's where I am today.
Perfect. So in terms of you leaving GPE, that was back in 21?
No, I left GPE at Christmas last year. So it's only been 4 months.
Oh, okay. 4 months. God, it feels like a lifetime.
Yeah.
So, obviously we caught up previously a few weeks ago. Your first role since was for a generative AI platform called Laiout.
Yeah.
Do you just want to talk us through, I suppose, how that relationship evolved with Layout? Did they approach you out of the blue? Did you know them from days of old and have been working with them in the past? And also what they do as a business and the value that they add?
Yeah. So first of all, let's take it. I will come onto all those questions because they're great questions. But I think for the listeners, it's really worth explaining what generative AI is and what we mean by generative AI. These terms about AI can get bounded about an awful lot. Artificial intelligence has been around for almost 40 or 50 years, right? It's a point at which a machine learns from structured data an outcome. And the early instances of AI are when it is sort of learning how to play chess or how to play, machines optimize the number of moves that something can make, and will learn eventually how to make the next move at chess. And it eventually gets so good that it beats humans at chess. Machine learning is when you take structured data and the machine learns from that point and learns a route or an outcome. And the best examples of machine learning are things like Google Maps or the Netflix algorithm, so that it learns what you like to watch. It will keep you watching those things. So again, machine learning's been around for 20 years or so and started to be used in the background before we all got really carried away or overexcited with AI, as I can tend to get to. But generative AI is why ChatGPT and OpenAI is the thing that sort of really burst onto the scene about 18 months ago. And this is when you're starting to take something that was ordinarily a mathematical outcome into something a bit more creative by understanding what the next, like in the work version of OpenAI doesn't actually know what word it is putting in front of itself, but we know it's learnt enough from the internet that actually these are the words that should come from that point. So it can use vectors to come to issue written outcomes. But you can also do the same things with shapes and spaces. So if there's a rules engine that says, typically, a desk is 1200 wide by 900 deep. There is a chair that sits on that one desk, and that sits back another 900 millimeters. Then you've got a shape, and you've got a rectangle. And where you put those shapes and rectangles around a floor plan is what Layout does. So it's a generative AI tool that takes empty floor plans and will optimize the floor plan process, giving you 3 or 4 options in about 10 to 15 seconds. It sounds like it's like a quick, fantastic thing. Well, how could it possibly do that? But it's an algorithm that works in the background. It recognizes where cores are, where windows are, where columns are, and then will move desks around as a result of what it's learned from that point. And it's not designed to remove anybody from the process, in terms of you're still going to have a client, you're still going to have an architect, you're still going to have a contractor. But it gets to the point of optimization much quicker. So what we think is that in an hour's meeting briefing with a client who frankly may not understand 3-dimensional, you can see a 2D plan, but they may not really understand the implications of it. So we can get from that empty floor plan to, through discussion with the client, do you like this area? Don't you like that area? Probably within 45 minutes or an hour that you've got, you're 60 to 70, 80% of the way there with the brief. And then the architects will go up and work away their plans and you will work up the costs. And so it's really trying to take what can become a 10 and 12 week process into a 10 to 12 second process, but it's not quite that quick. But with, a team of people in the room trying to work out the best way to come up with an answer, we think we get there within, 45 minutes. And that's what I'm excited about. I think generative AI is when we can start to apply elements to the design process that we've all got to go through anyway, but just try and make them more efficient, save us all some time, allow everybody to get on with what they want to build and what they would like to do.
I think you said something previously in one of our other calls, and it was that the premise of AI is interesting, that the fact that you can save time, as you've just said, in that particular part of the procurement process, but it's about what you then do with those efficiencies that you've gained.
Yeah.
Whether that's at the back end of the program, you brought the end date forward a few months, or whether it's actually focusing on pre-construction and what do you do with that? I mean,
yeah.
For our audience, do you want to just quickly dip into that? Because it was a really interesting touch point.
Yeah. So it's the bandwidth that you're creating. So I think like if you've got a typical from an RIBA stage 1 to stage 4, I mean, you've always got a planning process to go through if you're designing a whole building. And that's always going to be a block. We can't do much about that just yet. But if you've got some Gen AI that can solve the planning, that would be great. Yeah, then we'll come back and talk to that in about a year's time. But that's not that's not quite where we are yet. I think it's going to be possible to shorten the design period of a building by a third, and even then potentially change the procurement route. So what I think is that if we can shorten that process by a third, and if it takes 2 years to design a building and get it to site, then if we've saved 8 to 9 months, what do we do with it? What do we do with the extra bandwidth and the extra time? Part of it might be that we just make the decision later. We put off making the decision. Maybe that's one thing. But what if we could actually procure slightly differently, that we procured all of the M&E equipment earlier, so that there was anybody who's done any work with any of the big tech companies, like Google, when they're bidding for work, you'll tender through an online platform and you sort of come back to the last minute and you see the time cut off and you sort of like reverse bidding. What's my best price? What can I get it to? Pretty transparent way of procuring services. If you were to apply that to the chillers or the fan coil units or the lights, then actually, if you think about it, part of the reason we do design and build is that we're waiting for the M&E subcontractor to get appointed before, and then only then do you get to the material selection, because you need some open market tension, and that's fair enough. But if you've got that equipment and you know what you're providing, then actually you've got to a point of design, and you can get to an 80% fixed tier design. So a design and build contract is placing less emphasis on the contractor to take the design risk and more to do what they're good at, which is the logistics and the supply and organization. And I think that could be transformative to the industry, because that balance between design and build and speed is really difficult. And a lot of people said to me, well, okay, would a client really take the risk in giving the free supply of equipment to a contractor because you're effectively taking that program risk? To which I would say, well, I think we've taken, as going back to my earlier point, you're taking the time risk really anyway, even if contractually you've tied it up. This exists today. This is how data centers are procured. The main client from a data center, the actual build contract is for the shed, for the concrete, and for whatever else, but actually all of the plant and equipment is free supply because they're buying it at such scale that you're taking that risk at that time. So I think this shifts a great deal, and that not only are you optimizing the design from the beginning, taking layout to a whole building scale, but you're also then transferring the risk, and that means there's a greater degree of fairness, if you like, that where people can make some money. And also I think you remove, what I would hope is you get to better product, better design, better optimization, and you're designing for an outcome for a customer. A really simple example is columns and structure. And up until now, almost every building that I've been involved in, the leasing team, who are very worried about how the building's going to present itself at completion, are very keen to show as clear column space as we can. At More London, we got up to 21 metre spans. So these are really deep floor plates with no columns in them. And actually, ironically, it ended up with more problems with bounce and vibration as a result of the large span. When you actually come to it, and Stephen, I know with your clients, you're sitting there, you're working with the end user and the end customer. Those clients don't care about columns, really. They may not visualize what's there, but what you're starting to get to is the point of how can I occupy that space efficiently? By the time you've put desks and meeting rooms and walls and partitions in, columns get lost on the floor. So if you can have spans of 6 meters or 5 meters or whatever they are, if you see offices designed from the 1960s, those were much tighter columns. They're actually less carbon because they're using less steel or less concrete, because you haven't got to carry these huge steel beams or piles and foundations and transfer significant load. So I think there's other benefits to that point too. And that's without optimizing the building. Going back to the Hickman, all of those data points are a means of machine learning. So you learn how the building should be optimized and how it should be worked out. So you then design it for a lower operation. The ChatGPT version of reading the O&M manuals means that you can ask your digital twin a question: what can I do to optimize my building? And it's knowing how a customer's moving around the building, and it's knowing how the building's used, or when the boiler was last updated, or where it was last maintained, or when something's going wrong. This is just one of the many cases of how I think AI can augment what we do in an industry that's struggling at the moment through inflation and cost, to make itself competitive and to skill shortages, that we can iron out those headings, those headaches, and get to a much better product for our customers and the occupiers using our buildings, and use them in a more sustainable way. So yeah, that's why I am out in the big wide world looking with Layout, which is just the start of where I get to, and hoping to advise other real estate companies how to implement their strategy to make the most of this technology.
So yeah, in terms of target users then for Layout, is it end developers, or is it perhaps also focused at architects for them to help supplement their current design offering? What's your current kind of user profile base?
So we have 4 user profile bases. The most important one are those forward-thinking businesses that want to be AI first in what they do, and how they want to work with their customers, thinking of something in hand, like yourself, Steve. So I think where we get to is the developers, so that you can optimize your core layouts as to where you want to put your core in the first instance. Architects and interior architects. Flexible workspace operators, we're getting a lot of traction with, because they're closer to the point of sale with their customers. So a number of the large, well-known brands in that area are starting to work with us, and we're starting to get some really good use cases in that. And then the final case is the occupiers, because a lot of people in real estate make the mistake that thinking once you fitted out a floor, that floor plate stayed as it. The churn that occurs within a floor is actually much greater, and we come to realize that market is something that we think will really benefit from Layout, and they're starting to see that too. And we're starting to work with some very well-known international investment banks to do that, because they often have to wait many weeks for internal sign-off before they can proceed. And that blockage is just a blocker to the business becoming more useful as they grow. So yeah, we're starting to really get there and see the scale.
I'm looking forward to see where it goes. I think another thing that you didn't mention was the sustainability angle of that software in the sense of embodied carbon. I think that embodied carbon in terms of new builds and whole life assessments is kind of, I say, well established now. And actually, we did an episode last week with Ella from AHMM talking about exactly that. But it's, in terms of Cat B fit out design and the embodied carbon that goes along with that, actually having live feedback on how your design decisions, sizes and shapes of selling spaces is having an impact on your embodied carbon. Having access to that data instantly is crucial. And I think, the flex market particularly are getting more focused on that. I think we had Cobra launch the first Manchester site. I think it was last week. We've got Rob coming on in a few weeks. They're all about not just a sustainable fit out, but a sustainable environment for the tenants and providing that transparency and access to the data that proves that they practice what they preach.
Exactly.
So that's really interesting. What we'll do is we'll put a link to Layout in the show notes as well as your contact details. So if anyone that is interested, they can pick up the conversation. I saw in the press recently that you're a busy person, a busy guy, and you're now not working at one software outfit, but two.
Yeah.
You've just joined as a non-exec at Eleco. Is it Eleco?
Eleco, yeah.
Eleco. Do you just very quickly before we call time, just want to give us a quick
so
intro?
Eleco are one of those rare things in the property and construction industry and prop tech and contech that they're a very profitable, well-established software company, mostly because they have a range of different software throughout the asset lifecycle. The most well-known of which is Asta Power Project, and Asta Power Project is the planning tool that most contractors and project managers use for planning their software. So they have that, but they have 8 or 9 different other pieces of software within the built environment that offer SaaS services to the real estate industry. And it's transitioned from the tech term and maintenance model to a SaaS model. So it's becoming increasingly profitable. It's just acquired a team of software designers from Romania called Vertical Digital. And what that means is it's starting to build capability to offer services to the client. So major subcontractors or concrete contractors who need some help with their own digitization process that want Ask the Power Project to give them some feedback that they put into their own data warehouse, we can now give that service to that company. So it's a really exciting time to join them and to bring together, my experience of the property and construction industry and technology to help them with their roadmap and product as they grow over the next few years.
Excellent. Okay, brilliant. Well, look, thanks ever so much for coming on. We like to end our episodes with kind of a look ahead for the next 12 months.
Okay.
Things that you would like to see happen over the next 12 months, things that perhaps you don't think are going to happen over the next 12 months, but should. And the reason being is that we can get you back on the show next year and it will give us something to reflect upon as sort of in the AI front. I think a really interesting piece is this whole improving the procurement process through Gen AI and what we do with that additional bandwidth. And I'm wondering if, the next 12 months, it's not a long period of time, in terms of having example projects of that. I think that's probably optimistic.
Yeah, I think it is optimistic. I think what I'd like to see is UK PropTech Association and BPF did a survey recently of trying to work out how many real estate companies had a digital strategy, and only 25% of them did. I'd like in the next 12 months for that to be closer to 75%, because if you're not starting to think about how you can incorporate data and AI into your business, then there are enough of your competitors out there that are, and you are going to get left behind. I'm having conversations with a number of property companies and major contractors who have started to organize their data in such a way that they could begin to get to that point. And I think the other telling point from that survey was that most people thought that AI would have a significant effect, but in 3 to 5 years' time, they're going to be unpleasantly surprised. It will have a much greater effect in a much shorter period of time, particularly in the world of work. And the best way you can describe that is Meta. Right, so parent company of Facebook. Meta reduced headcount by 13% last year, but increased their revenue by 57%. And it's never been done before when you've cut back on cost and increased revenue at the same time. And the way they've done it is to deploying AI in their own business. Now, they are a tech business, but you can sort of see when you're at that level of saving that the use of this is going to become compelling. And I think it's going to have an effect on demand, and it's going to have an effect on where and how we work and what we do. And you need to get your strategy in place, really. And if your listeners need some help, I'm here to help them do that.
They know exactly where to go. I think you hit the nail on the head. And that runs right from a consultant services perspective, right up to to end user, in the sense of take a flex office provider as an example. If we can work on a project with them and we can, using the tools available to us, the likes of Layout, we can offer them a procurement strategy that essentially brings their end date forward by 4 months. Well, then that's them coming to market 4 months before a competitor.
And
that's today.
That's a lot of revenue.
That's not in 3 years' time. Food for thought. Look, James, I've really enjoyed today. Thanks ever so much for coming on. At some point, we can have a whole nother episode purely on the procurement piece, because I think our audience would love to listen to it. Thanks very much for your time, and we'll catch up soon.
Great, and you.
Thanks, James. This podcast is sponsored by Fidgins, a London-based cost consultancy. Please visit fidgins.co.uk to find out more about our market-leading service and some of the amazing clients we get to work with. We're super open to guest recommendations for this podcast, so if there's anyone in the industry you'd like to get on the show, please visit the website or send me a message on LinkedIn, and I'll try to make it happen. Thanks, and bye for now.